to.
There it goes.
So, hey guys, what's up? So once again, tradition. I got a QA thing going. Hopefully, I'll be able to do this traditionally every month. And also, as traditionally is done with just about all my QAs, we had technical difficulties. In fact, we're still kind of going through them now. And my mic didn't want to work at first, so now I'm using the my camera mic, and then Skull was going to be in, and he's having problems connecting. Thank you very much, Google Hangouts. So I'm going to try to give him a few minutes to get on, and because he's going to do a reset and see if that works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, we'll just deal with it as it comes. I might have a couple of other guests jumping in. It all depends on if they got their invites and whether they feel like jumping in or not, or if they're available. But I do have at least one guest on here. He goes by the name Boji. If you want to say hello.
Yeah, I'm just stopping by. I've got like 2 hours before work, and I thought I'd pop in and add a little color.
Yeah, just as I had stated before, those who were at a certain Patreon level would be able to get in on the chat, and he was one of the people. And if I remember correctly, you were, you weren't too sure if you'd be able to make Hangouts or if it would be a thing. And I'm like, yeah, jump on in. So hopefully this will prove entertaining for you, and it is great, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again next month. So, and here he is. Now let's see if we can actually hear him. Hello? No. Oh God. We've been having this problem ever since like what, 5:57. It's just been
half an hour.
Yeah. We have a Skull, we have Skullagram, but we can't hear him because we're having sound issues, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know. I don't know if his mic is off. I don't know if it's because of Hangouts. I don't know. But now we're doing this live, and I can't cut this off now, so I'm not really too sure what's going on. I don't know. I mean, if Skull, if you want to split because this is not working, I personally understand. Or if you want, you can put your answers in on the chat, and then I can just speak them out loud. I don't know. But, dear Lord, this is starting out great, isn't it? Let's just get on with the questions. I'm going to start off with the way I originally said that I was going to do it. And hopefully soon Skull will be able to somehow get the sound working, and then he'll be able to make his own comments. So we will see. Again, I don't know what the problem is, but it's Google Hangouts for you. Every time me and Skull try to get together in a Hangout, something goes wrong. Okay, he says he'll keep trying, so we'll see how this goes. Off to a great start. Anyway, so as I stated before, the way I was going to be doing the QA is I was first going to read off questions that were sent to me, and then I will answer any questions that happen to pop in on in the comment section or the actual chat of this Hangout. So bear with me as I do this. I got a couple of interesting questions. I didn't get a whole bunch, but to be honest, I wasn't expecting all that much because, again, I'm a small channel, and I did kind of spring this sort of short notice. So I'm going to start with the very first question that I was given, and I thought it was kind of an odd question to ask me of all people, but here we go. It's from Mr. Dinvader, and he's asking me, am I voting for Trump? Why or why not? And he would like me to go more in depth. This is, the more in depth I get with my answer, the better. Okay. Anybody who's watched my channel for any length of time should already get an idea of where my politics lie. I mean, I do try to, be as fair-minded as possible. I try to weigh both sides of arguments and, understand and all that. But yeah, I do lean toward the left. I'm not going to apologize for that. It's just who I am. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything on the left, especially when it comes to gun control and all that. But essentially, I lean toward the left. And there's a lot of conservative rhetoric that just rubs me the wrong way. And then you get Trump. So right away, I would think that you should already get an idea of whether I'm going to vote for him or not. But in case anybody is not sure, the answer is no. I'm not voting for him. Now, I will say that the reason why I'm not voting for him, it's not because of his personality, which I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't like him. I don't like the way he acts. I don't like the way he does that. Yeah, come on, let's call, the guy's an
He's a
egotistical
blowhard.
asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is a
Yeah.
blowhard. There's no getting around it. There just isn't. I know people are gonna try to, apologize for it by saying stuff like, well, he speaks his mind. So do homeless people on the street. Doesn't mean that what they're saying is, relevant or worth listening to. But that's not the main reason why, his attitude or his personality doesn't really have anything to do with the job description. Oh my God! We have a snap.
What's that sound?
Oh my God!
Okay. So as it turns out, apparently the problem was hardware related on my side. I just switched it to another USB port and now it's working. So I guess I have a USB port dying on me here.
It could be that. It might be what happens with my computer sometimes. Sometimes my USB port will get kind of confused it's weird. Like if I pull out and then put back in, every now and then the USB port will just freak the hell out and then not work unless I do a restart.
Yeah, the strange thing is I just flipped them because I didn't have another free USB port, so I just switched that one with the mouse. The mouse is working now, even though it's in the same port that the microphone was before. Computers, they drive you nuts.
Yeah, tell me about it. I was just telling Bo that before we went on the broadcast that I was busy overclocking my chip last night and like just checking this setting, checking this voltage, checking this one, doing this stress test. I was going out of my mind until around 6 o'clock this morning. So yeah, but I think I got it stable now. It hasn't blown up yet. So, but yeah, glad to have your voice on. So of course, yes. You and Bo, anytime you want to chime in on this, feel free. But as I was saying about Trump, his personality really doesn't have much to do with the job description. So it's not like, okay, I don't like him, so I'm not going to vote for him. That's not the reason why I'm not going to vote for him. The reason why I'm not going to vote for him is because I personally think that the guy does not have the qualifications to lead a country. Now, some people will spit back at me, well, he's a great businessman, so of course. Number one, just because you can run a business doesn't mean that you can run a country. And not that the president runs the country, but you guys get what I'm saying. Being the head of a government is different than being the head of a freaking company, especially since the way American businesses tend to run, all they really care about is raising profit. That's it. The welfare of their employees is secondary. The quality of their products, as much as you think that would be linked to a high profitability, is secondary. Ask anyone who's bought, a product these days and comparing it to the way things used to be built just a few years ago, especially since built-in obsolescence seems to be a model that a lot of people are following now. Ask anyone who's had to deal with a printer in the past 20 years. It's always just about like, how much more money can I make? How much more money can I make? That's pretty much what it is. When you're running a government, it's not about, okay, so how much wealth can we generate? That's part of it, but you also have to make sure that the people who are helping to generate that wealth are well taken care of. That's what a government is for, to ensure the welfare and the safety and the ongoing, stability of the culture that it's helping to run. Whether it be a dictatorship, whether it be a democracy, whether it be, whatever, if the government actually is going to do a good job, and most don't, but if they're going to do a good job, they have to, at the very least, take care of the inner structure of their country. I mean, even if you're a greedy, complete, selfish bastard, your infrastructure, you got to at least understand your infrastructure has to work, your economy has to be working, and the people have to be more or less healthy and able to keep the country going in order for your country to survive. He doesn't have the qualifications to make that work. And all you have to do is look at how he ran his businesses since the 80s to see that, yeah, this guy would not be a good leader for government. It's weird to me that we live in the internet age now. You can look anything up. And no one's bothered to, well, I shouldn't say no one. The people who are supporting him haven't bothered to look up how well his business is done. He has more failures when it comes to business than successes. And a lot of his failures weren't just simply because, wrong place at the wrong time or, bad economy that year. some of it was just really stupid ideas, like Trump steaks. I didn't make that up. Trump steaks. There was a time he was selling steaks. Steaks.
He's got Trump wine and Trump shoes too, I believe.
Yeah, Trump. Yeah, the Trump shoes.
You're right. It does show his narcissism there too. He's a blowhard and narcissist.
And it's like the thing that really cracks me up about the steak thing. The reason why I brought that one up, it just kind of cracks me up that this was a dude who before was selling steaks. I forgot what you used to call those infomercials that you'd sometimes see at late at night. That's how he was selling those freaking things. And it's supposed to be these are the best freaking steaks, best meat you can get. And the reason why that crashed and burned was because of all the damn safety violations and health codes that it was breaking putting this meat out.
And then there is Trump University, this whole fraudulent bullshit that led to lawsuits. That's not the kind of person that I would trust running the country at all.
I mean, hell, there's still fallout going on over that. To this day, there's fallout going over the Trump University right now as he's campaigning. It's not as if this stuff is hard to look up. It's because of stuff like that. And not only that, then we have to get to the elephant in the room, which is all the supporters. Let's face it, there's a certain stereotype that is seen for the typical Trump supporter, and the problem with stereotypes is they're based on a kernel of truth. In this case, this kernel is big enough to choke on, because we've seen the way they act at rallies. We've seen what happens when an outsider happens to walk on in. Even if that outsider isn't saying anything, even if they're wearing a shirt simply saying, "I come in peace," they're not going to get a very nice reception. We have video footage of this. Recently, there was violence going on in freaking California. And instead of, somebody can go, well, he can't really control those people. Yeah, you're right, he can't. But you could at least say, guys, cut the shit out. He hasn't said that.
And also, even worse, he's inciting it outright. I mean, the one case where someone knocked down a guy at the rally, and he was like, yep, the guy who threw the first punch, I'm going to cover his legal fees because I'm just that big of a scumbag.
Yeah.
What?
And this is somebody who you want to put in charge of our military? Of nuclear arms? Of our basic economy? This is not... Forget politics. Forget ideology. It doesn't matter what the guy believes. This is not somebody who you put in power. Period. The sad thing is, I know why people are supporting him, and it isn't just as cut and dry as, well, they're assholes and he's an asshole, so it's a little scarier and sadder than that. The typical Trump supporter is frustrated, scared, depressed, and on their way out. And when I'm saying on their way out, I'm not saying it in the way that some people, well, their time is over. No. It's okay. Here's a scary statistic I recently looked up for a video I'm planning on making. They were looking at, I forgot who did this, and when I do the video on this, I'll make sure to have the links to all the reports that I was researching for this, so you guys won't see that I'm pulling this out of my ass. They were doing statistics and reports on poverty and its effects, on health and, your lifespan and all that. And they found something kind of interesting in that, we already know the middle class in the U.S. is falling. And there are a lot of people who are unemployed who are no longer looking for work, and a lot of those people are white males. They used to be able to at least make a working class wage, if not a middle class. But after the whole, bubble burst with the real estate again. Oh, and by the way, speaking of real estate bubbles, remember what happened in the 80s? Trump was in the middle of that shit too, which helped to cause the crash. Just saying. We had the other crash again recently. Economy went to shit. People were losing jobs left and right. Middle class suddenly found themselves working class or worse. And many of them haven't recovered yet. Even though they say, oh, the economy's coming back. The economy's back. Yeah, for the people who were able to get their hands on that money. But for the rest of us, we're still struggling. We've seen food prices jump up. We've seen, we've seen how hard it is to get like a job at the same level that you used to get it at. There's like college students, you know, working in freaking McDonald's or in factories instead of what their degrees are at. Things are rough. And if you live in the rural areas, it's even worse. And hey, last time I checked, the United States is mostly made up of rural areas. So you got all these people down and out of work, and they're white males. And so now, when you're depressed, when you're frustrated, what happens? Besides crime, you also start finding any escapes you can find. So, you know, you're eating crappier food, you are turning to drugs. The meth epidemic that's been jumping up recently and the heroin epidemic that's been going crazy recently has been happening in these rural areas. The abuse of a lot of over-the-counter drugs has been happening in a lot of these areas, and it's been killing them off. So not only are they, you know, down and out losing jobs, they're also fucking dying. And then when they see the reports about how by 2050 supposedly whites are going to be a minority in the country, I'm not so sure how much I believe that, but you add all that up and now they're terrified that, oh my God, we're an endangered species. So now you're frustrated, tired, scared, and pissed, but you don't know who to throw the anger at other than the usual suspects. And then along comes Trump.
Yeah, he comes in and he says, tremendous. Huge.
Along comes Trump. And now I am hoping anybody who's ever wondered how can those people in the Middle East support such crazy, you know, violent acts? You're seeing how it can happen right now. When you're frustrated, when you're thinking there's no escape from whatever dark fate you think is in front of you, and then somebody gives you some easy answers and an easy way out, or is an outlet for your rage, you're going to link to that person whether or not they're qualified to be your leader. You're just going to do it. This is how ISIS pops up. I shouldn't call him ISIS. That god is his name. This is how the Islamic State popped up. This is how, you got all these terrorist groups popping up. These are frustrated people who, whether it's real or not, perceive themselves to be at risk. And so they're going to latch onto whatever savior happens to pop along who is an outlet for their rage, and a magnet for their rage. Like, I can relate to him because he says all the garbage that they want to spew, whether it happens to be valid or not. So this is one of the main reasons why I understand what's going on. Doesn't mean that I support it. Hell no. But I understand why they would do it. I just wish that the average human being would put their emotion aside and be like, okay, wait a minute, who the hell am I following? Am I that desperate that this is the dude that I'm going to be supporting?
No, I could figure that out.
Anyway, I think I went on this question long enough. It was just about whether I'm voting for Trump and why. I'm not. I think I went well into why. Move on to the next one because I really didn't want to get into politics with this if I could help it because you know me in politics. I can run my mouth all day. Next question comes from Yehoshua Quiroga, who says that in my most recent video I talked about weapons and social entropy, and do I think that people's desire as well as their distaste for weapons and guns can stem from a lack of confidence in themselves, whether physically or mentally? That's a pretty good question. Honestly, I'm thinking the whole thing stems, I mean, there probably is, a feeling of inadequacy when it comes to hoarding a bunch of weapons, but really I think it's just more of them stemming from the fact that they feel like they're on their own. If you live in a stable society, let's condense it down so it can be more relatable to people, because when I say society, people consider society to be this weird nebulous giant thing when it's something that they're a part of. Let's put it down to a scope that's easier for us to grasp.
Just one moment. Can you reread the question? Because the way you said it, it sounded to me as if the question was about people who do not like weapons, not about people who like them.
This taste for weapons. Oh, I think you're right. Do you think
you got that.
Do you think that people's desire as well as their distaste for weapons and guns can stem from a lack of confidence in themselves?
Oh, both.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, you could attribute both too.
I do think that question might come from somebody who read a little bit into Freud, because that line of thinking is very typical in psychodynamic I don't even want to call it psychology, in psychodynamics. So Victorian age ideas about how the mind works.
Okay.
So distaste for weapons. There was Freud even wrote on that. Distaste for weapons has some implications, and love for weapons has others. And I'm not much of a Freudian, so I couldn't really tell you much what he wrote. But I know that that idea is very standard for a Victorian age understanding of how humans work.
Okay. Actually, I'm glad that you interjected that.
Sorry. I think that's something that fear of weapons is a sign of retarded sexual development or something like that, which people generally like to pick up on. But hey, it's Freud, his pseudoscience. So.
Everything is a sign of retarded sexual something.
Yes,
if we go by
and everything
Freud.
is retarded, like oppressed sexual desires and everything. I'm thinking the guy just had some weird fetishes and was just jumping to conclusions about everybody else.
That's definitely possible. It's something I kind of suspected. I mean, I do personally believe that a lot of the hang-ups that we have in society are because we just have really messed up, we just have not been able to really get over our sexual selves. And the more repressed the society is, the more hang-ups we seem to have. But I don't think that's the end-all to be-all of every single last freaking problem we have.
Yes.
I mean, it's, I mean, if we're going to be talking about the gender wars, yeah, that definitely stems from, like, a lot of sexual hang-ups. If we're going to be talking about social norms and problems with, oh, this person's not straight, this person, yeah, definitely sexual hang-ups. But every problem, like, violence
weapons?
or weapons, I don't think so. A weapon is a tool. You're not, I mean, Freud would do that. Say, okay, oh, he doesn't like the saw, he doesn't like a hammer, there must be some sexual repression. Because a weapon's a tool. It's a very specific tool for a specific purpose.
A hammer is looks like a penis, so that symbolism triggers a reaction in those people. I don't know.
But I'm thinking, people's desire or distaste for weapons.
I would say no.
I'm thinking, okay, all right, if we're going to be talking about, like, just people, just a general interest in weapons, whether they be hobbyists or whether they're, straight up training in them, for whatever reason, people are going to like what they're going to like and they're going to dislike what they're going to dislike. Some of it stems from their upbringing or their own personalities. Like somebody who tends to, always trying to find peaceful solutions or is a bit of a pacifist or whatever, yeah, they're probably not going to like weapons too much because weapons are made for a specific purpose. You can say, well, it's to defend yourself. Yeah, but to defend yourself, you kind of have to stop the other guy from hurting you, and usually that means doing damage. There's no getting around it. You can talk all you want about how I can subdue him non-violently. There is going to be some inherent violence going on. Even if you're just throwing the guy to the ground and putting him in an arm bar, you're still causing pain. You're still causing damage to an extent. And if you're using a weapon to do it, it's almost unavoidable that something's going to get hurt. So that's what weapons are for. Somebody who happens to have a more, peaceful mindset probably isn't going to be able to reconcile that, so they're not going to really like them. And to be perfectly honest, so many people I've bumped into who have a problem with guns and who are very, for gun control and all that, they tend to be people who always want to find more peaceful solutions. They don't really like violence much, and some of them don't even like martial arts. When I start talking martial arts, they're like, so like they're not, they're just not for that. On the other hand, you also got people who do like weapons a lot, just because they're fascinated by them. It has little to do with the inherent violence behind it. It's just the skills that it takes to use one, or maybe they're interested in the history of its use, or its development, the culture around it, or just the time period that the particular weapon comes from. Or maybe they're just interested in practical things, like if we're going to be talking about modern weapons, like guns, like let's just put it out there, like just straight up guns, rifles, pistols. Maybe they just simply like the fact that this is a modern tool for a modern age, and I just want to be good with this particular tool because, it represents our time now. It's a skill that I can apply easily in my life. I've bumped into people like that also who their entire life is that way. Everything is about having a practical mindset and having an applicable skill. Using weapons is one of them.
I think that whole using part is where we potentially can take the question in less in the sense that liking weapons shows that they feel inadequate about themselves, but more in the sense that some people just really like having skill sets. So if they feel, oh, I'm lacking in a certain set of skills that can be acquired through martial arts, through guns, through sword fighting or anything, that might very well be a reason to get into it or stay in this, let's call it sport for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But I don't really see how it would apply to the other side.
And also, I think it's not a question that you can just answer generally, because people who like or dislike or are indifferent to weapons, it's the entire population, it's very diverse. And everybody who either likes or dislikes them or doesn't care, they're going to have their own personal reason. In some cases, yes, I'm sure there are some people who feel that they are physically, incapable or at least at less than ideal odds if they have to defend themselves, and then they want to compensate. Or then there are also other people who think that, well, okay, so maybe that person is individually physically fit and knows martial arts and everything, but then they may be thinking, okay, so what if like 10 gangbangers rush me? I'm not going to have a chance without a weapon. Even with a weapon, that can be very difficult. But at least it's more of an equalizer, so they can have completely different reasons, and people who dislike them can also dislike them for completely different reasons. Either they think it's a risk to society, largely about guns, or they personally do not like them, they are personally scared by them, or they find them distasteful, or whatever. It can be so many reasons. So
yeah. And then just to wrap up before I move on to the next one, unless Bo, you want to throw anything in here as well, or yeah, okay. Another thing that gets me about weapons and people like wondering whether they're bad or good or whatever, we've been dealing with weapons for a very long time. Since like the dawn of civilization, before then, weapons have always been there. And they themselves aren't necessarily the cause of, or for the cause of society breaking down or building up. They just are there. They're a tool that human beings use to survive, whether from dealing with animals or dealing with each other. It's just an inherent part of society, whether we like it or not. And your desire to acquire a whole bunch of them, as I was saying in the beginning before Clara helped to clarify the question. I'm really
Since
glad.
when am I called Clara?
What is it? God, it's late. I only had 3 hours sleep. Please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Clara, I'm glad, but I am glad you're here because you really helped to clarify the question, and plus your background really helps with this. But the other thing I wanted to say is, like, the more safe you feel in your society, the less I think you're going to really feel like I need to have this weapon. Like, think of your own neighborhood. Like my neighborhood, for instance, I feel pretty safe here. I know most of the people in the neighborhood, they know us. I thought for a second my computer froze, but I think I'm fine.
yeah, there was some audio
There was,
issues.
but you're back.
Okay, that was very odd. I hope that doesn't happen again. But yeah, my neighborhood, I feel pretty safe here. They know us, we know them, we know each other's kids, they watch each other. So this is not a place where I worry too much about my safety, and I'm pretty generally just relaxed when I'm here. I don't feel like I have to be on my guard. Whereas if I happen to drive, say, several miles down that way, I'll be in an area where I know is kind of rough and people don't really care too much about each other, and that's when my awareness is up, when I'm spotting every little shadow. It depends on how safe you feel and how well your particular group is running. Now, when it comes to straight up society, and this kind of goes back to that video I made, if you feel if the society you live in does not give you that feeling of ease where you think that, okay, everything's running fine, and you're in that kind of positive mood, hi, how you doing? Oh, that's a new guy, you're new here? If you feel more like, hey, you're in the wrong place, man, then yeah, you're probably going to want to stockpile weapons a little bit more, because now you don't feel secure, you don't feel safe, and you feel like things are going to break down at any minute, and you just can't trust the person next to you. again, I don't think that's necessarily something that shows an inadequacy in and of themselves. It's more them not trusting their environment.
And I can definitely confirm. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And there are those that have been mugged before, robbed before, have been assaulted before. And I have a friend I live in California. My friend owns a vineyard, and every weekend, about after a Friday night, there's always somebody who's been messing with the property, destroying some of the grapevines or whatever they have over there, or tampering with graffiti and that sort of thing. So even when they're on their own property, which can be acres, they might carry or have something to that effect.
Yeah. So there's those factors. And I mean, hell,
just completely unthinkable up here in Canada.
Yeah. And even so, like I find the difference quite noticeable between Norway and Canada.
Oh God, yes.
Norway, of course, there's crime everywhere, no doubt about it. Crime, homelessness, this and that, all these kinds of problems, but far less so, and I found that very noticeable. In Norway, I never had this feeling that I have to watch everybody. Oh, there's somebody behind you. I better occasionally look out, because who knows what they're going to do. I never had that. I was just walking around, just, okay, feeling safe. And then here, I mean, we came to Prince George first, so it's known for having fairly high crime.
For Canada.
For Canada. Which is still, compared to many U.S. cities, it's still not that bad, but
compared to pretty much every U.S. city.
But even so, yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Statistics, yeah.
Statistically, you're 400% more likely to be killed in Prince George than in Toronto. So we look up how many murders happen. There was, I think, 1 murder in Toronto or something like that.
Wow.
Oh no, I think that was in Prince George already.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was 1 murder in Prince George for the entire year, and that made it the most crime-ridden city of all of Canada.
Well, it's mainly, it's mainly theft and whatever, vandalism and other things. But like, even so, I definitely found that noticeable in downtown and also other areas. I just have a certain feeling of unease. I want to be, watch out. Who is where? Where does this person walk? Oh, that guy over there looks a bit fishy, because there's just the number of homeless people, the number of gangs, and specifically also people with mental illnesses. I've never seen that many people like doing crazy talk, like shouting in public and babbling insane stuff, and being clearly mentally disturbed. I've never seen that many in Europe compared to here.
Oh, here.
Yeah, we don't let them out on the street in Europe.
Pretty
Short
much.
version.
Yeah. You actually take care of them.
Yep.
Oh, well. That's the Western Hemisphere for you. Okay, to move on to the next one, but that was a pretty good question, Joshua. Thank you very much for that one. Now to go to Vivi Malazan, who is watching right now. Hey, what's up? He actually gave me 4 questions. So let's get on with it. Number 1, it says, the Jian's point of balance. How far away from the handguard do I usually prefer for a Jian? Okay. I'm glad you said at least for me. This is my personal taste, because you will find some people, well, the sword has to be this long to this, that, and that, and this, that, and then you look at historical records and yet it's BS. No. People tend to, I mean, granted, when they were making for the military, yeah, you standardize, because, well, you're making for the military, you're making a vast amount of weaponry. You don't got time to go to every single last soldier. So how do you like it? No, come on. You're going to take it this way and you're going to like it or else. But generally, when you start dealing with personal arms and, like civilian martial artists, you start seeing variations all over the freaking place. So if you're going to be asking my particular taste on where the balance point should be, I always feel it should be at least 2.5 to 4 inches from the handguard. That's my personal taste. The reason why I like it that way is because you get a really good kind of balance between the mass needed for a good cut, but also enough lightness in, throughout the material for good point control. This is a cut and thrust sword, so I need to be able to cut and thrust with it. If it's too close to the handguard, yeah, I got some great point control, but forget cutting with the freaking thing. If we're gonna put it way to like 6 inches from the handguard or further up, now I'm dealing with a freaking falchion. It's not it's not a Jian, now I'm just simply beating them over with a heavy, sharpened, it's like hitting with a crowbar or something like that. So I like that balance point around, like I said, around from the 2.5 to the 4-inch mark from the handguard. That's my personal taste. And generally that tends to be where Jian are at anyway. But I rarely see them kind of, differ from that area. The only exceptions I've seen besides badly made Jian are some mantis stylists, some mantis fist stylists, especially northern mantis guys. They really seem to like their swords very light with movement. Like they really like pushing that balance point as close to the handguard as they can get away with, because they like going with a lot of flicking motions, and it's a lot easier to do that if you're not fighting the mass. So to kind of go with the quick motions that they like doing with their hand motions, and when they're putting it with their weapon, they do the same thing. There's a lot of snap and flick with the way they use their swords, and so having the balance point closer to the handguard facilitates that. See, that's their style, so it works for them. But me personally, I'd like to push it a little bit further out so that when I'm hitting them with the blade, it'll actually cut through. So that's my personal preference. Second question. In a scenario of a fair fight using the same weapons, is it a lesser... Yeah, fair fight, which I'm going to be honest, there's really no such thing, but whatever. Like, unless you set up a duel and then you have a whole bunch of rules beforehand, there's really no such thing as a fair fight. But yeah, in the scenario of a fair fight using the same weapons, is it a lesser choice to use a two-handed Jian one-handed, assuming you can always switch back to using it two-handed, but using it one-handed have to be a prominent theme in your fighting style? Would it be a lesser option? That seems kind of awkward. I think I get what you're saying.
So you're in a fight where you've agreed to duel with someone on equal terms.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have one hand or two? Would this be a sporting event, or would it be with your life on the line? How would you?
I would think if we're you, because the question doesn't really say it's for sport, so I'm assuming it's life on the line. He does say that he notices that the European longsword treatises did not cover much on using a longsword one-handed. Skull, do you know if that's true or not? Or
I haven't seen much in the manuals, if anything at all, using the longsword with one hand. I mean, there are certain situations where you could try, like for example, some people like to do a surprise attack where they just use the lower hand and swing it out all the way with one hand with an attack to the legs, because then you can cover more distance than you can normally. But if your opponent sees that coming, you're in a world of hurt, because then you're all the way out. If they hit the blade on the flat down, it's on the ground, you're done for.
Yeah.
So it's extremely highly risky. And I'm also wondering with the entire thing of, like, you have to apparently use it predominantly with two hands, but also with one. Like, who keeps track of how many cuts and thrusts you may do with one hand? It seems like a very strange, arbitrary thing. But in general, personally, I don't see much of a reason to use a two-handed weapon with one hand. It's designed with two-handed use in mind, and the weight and balance and length is going to facilitate two-handed use primarily. If you use it with one hand, you also always have so much of the handle sticking out. It can hit your wrist and it can get in the way, and
I will say this. I'm not going to try to answer the question. First, is it a lesser choice to use a two-handed Jian one-handed? I don't think so. The reason why I'm going to say I don't think it's a lesser choice, because obviously these days you got Jian where the hand guard is like this. It's obviously one-handed, right? Though I sometimes see, oh man, I might need to double up, so I got to hold it two-handed. But then you end up holding it like this, and that's just not. It's not a good grip. I know in the movies they love to put their hands this close all the time, but you're not wielding an axe. You're wielding a sword. You need leverage, so you need some space between the hands to be able to do this. I honestly feel, at least from the bit of research that I've been doing, and the more I've been looking up, especially old, looking at pictures of old historical weapons, the more I'm finding that it's really when the Jian became more of a civilian weapon than a military weapon that you start seeing it become more of a one-handed tool. I mean, yeah, if you're going to be looking at, Bronze Age weapons, and yeah, they were all one-handed tools because the blades are like this freaking big. But as they started stretching them out, and especially by the time you get to the Han Dynasty, where they started working with iron and steel, you get these long freaking swords, like ridiculously long swords. I mean, not, Dark Souls long, but, pretty damn long. Like, we're talking like, if I'm going to be throwing inches out there, like 40-inch length blades, 36-inch length blades. These are not, these aren't toothpicks. These are some pretty long freaking swords.
Length already.
So yeah, and you can actually find, like, if you look them up, you will find old historical examples of Han swords, Han Jian and Han Do, that are pretty freaking long, and they obviously were used with two hands. The military stuff I've noticed were mostly two-handed, if they didn't have any shields with them. If they were using them with shields, and shields were used in China, believe it or not, then yeah, you might see some one-handed variants, but by and large, the handle would still at least be kind of long enough to kind of grip it here. Like even Tang Dynasty swords, which there was a lot of shields used during that time, they still had, long enough so that you can put a second hand there and it not being cumbersome. So that then makes us wonder, so where did the one-handed thing come in? Well, I'm thinking that's more with civilian use, because with the military guy, yeah, you want your tools to be heavy and, tough enough to kill and all that, but a civilian, they don't train like the military. That's something a lot of people tend to forget. Like, think of the military nowadays, like, guys going in the Marines or in the Army or boot camp. Those guys train, like, they got, like, torturous freaking training regimens to get them in the shape that they need to be in, and that's for just shooting guns. I mean, yeah, they train for close combat and all that, but their weaponry is primarily long range, and they still beat the crap out of themselves to get themselves in the type of shape that most civilians are just not in. Now, put that context in, those times when they were working with cold arms, not firearms. Yeah, you better be in really good condition to be able to march long terrains with heavy armor and equipment and then get on the battlefield and start swinging. Yeah, they got to be in really good freaking condition, and their arms reflect that. But then you get the average civilian who, let's face it, if they can get away with not having to train boot camp ways, they ain't going to do it. But if they're traveling from one place to another, they're still going to need weaponry, right? So, hey, well, this one-handed version's lighter, it still gets the job done, let's stick with that. And then they start modifying the techniques to work with one hand. Now, I don't have any solid evidence that that's exactly how it went, but it sure looks that way, especially when I start looking at certain older sword forms, or sword forms that at least have traces of older stuff in there, where I'm seeing they practice it one-handed, but then they apply it too. Xingyi has weapon forms like that. They'll practice it one-handed, then when they actually apply it, they're gripping it in two hands. Another sword form from the Yangqing style, or the Lost Track style, has a fantastic sword form. You practice it one-handed, all the applications are with two. And this is with the Jian. So obviously, and even the Tai Chi sword that everyone sees all slow and graceful, many of them work with these long-ass freaking weapons, especially Bagua Zhang. They work with these gigantic freaking weapons because they're basing it on weapons that were actually used. Not just ornaments on their side or like just personal sidearms to look good. No, they were working with weapons that were actually used, and they needed to be long and heavy, and sometimes, yeah, you're going to want that two-handed blow to cut through them. So would I think having, a one-handed technique with a two-handed sword be a detriment? Not really, as long as you know how to use it properly.
Yeah, if you come under attack, you'll fall back to your training.
Yeah, you fall back to your training, and all your one-handed techniques can be adapted with two hands. Granted, you might be shortening your reach a bit, but there's no reason that a cut that you're doing with one hand cannot be stabilized and still good and strong enough with two. You're working with pretty much similar body mechanics, similar technique. The only difference is now you put a second hand in there. When I'm doing this particular cut, and I guess I gotta go back to kind of show my whole body. When I do this particular cut, notice I'm doing the one-handed grip thing here, but this hand is following, and I'm actually following traditional form. Many times this hand will follow like that. I mean, sometimes it'll do it like this, but there's still this motion. You just bring the hands close together, and you're still doing the same freaking thing. There's no detriment there. Now, there is one thing, though, that needs to be kept in mind, and that's what Skull brought up earlier about having a two-handed, hilt. This getting in the way. You got to be careful about that. Now, I don't know how the Europeans would handle this. I just know that when the Chinese were mostly working with this is pretty much the way they kind of dealt with it. Just keep it on the inside. So you don't really have to worry too much about it whacking on your forearm, as long as you just keep this kind of like on the inside and be mindful of where that edge is. When I'm cutting straight down like that, I'm not going to just cut straight down and then whack, ouch, and then I die. It cuts down like that, and see, right on the inside. Like
Viking pommels, where you also want to have them on the inside.
And I mean, of course, then I know a lot of people are saying, but man, dude, then what about the? Because I know this makes a lot of people wince. And all I can tell you, and I really need to get. I've been trying to do videos showing how you can actually keep your hands from getting chopped up. It's kind of weird how they came up with weapons where the handguard was not really instrumental in defense. This was just there to keep you from going. And throughout the centuries, that's pretty much all the way up until now. This is pretty much how they kept their swords. This is just there to keep your hands from going over. It's not there to actually stop the blade. And this has led to some confusion for people as to well, how do you use the handguard? And then you have some masters making crap up. Oh, well, we use the handguard to lock, or we use the handguard to slice. And the handguard was never used because they never thought of using the handguard that way. If an attack was coming towards your hand, you moved your hand out the way and attacked their wrist at the same time. That was your answer. You never let the blade get here. You let the blade get there, you failed. That was their reasoning. Now, we can argue back and forth about whether that was smart reasoning, and, well, that's what the armchair martial arts stuff, the discussions are for. But that's the reality of the situation. They never thought of it. And people, how could they never think of it? There's a lot of stuff that, for the longest time, long swords were cruciform. It was like until centuries later, it might be a good idea to actually put like a basket around here to keep my hand protected instead of like all the time trying to figure it. Sometimes you just used to do things a certain way without thinking of a better way to do it. It takes a maverick to come along. Hey, why don't I just do this? I'm kind of going a bit off topic, but to answer that first question, I don't think it's a detriment to use a two-handed sword one-handed. It's been done several times before, and many times you could just fight one-handed and switch to two-handed and back again. It's in person. That's one of the main reasons why I picked up that sword to begin with. I liked the fact that I had that option, and there's certain things that I practice where I kind of have to go between the two, so it works for me.
I would also add that there's definitely a gray zone between where it gets difficult to determine, is this a one-handed sword that you can use with two hands because the grip is long enough, or is this a two-handed sword that you can use with one hand? Because in a lot of cases, like the Messer, for example, the European Messer is primarily a one-handed weapon, but the grip is long enough that you can use two. And also with the long grip, it has pros and cons. On the one hand, there are techniques where you actually hook with the grip against your opponent's arm and get past the defense that way. But at the same time, your opponent can also grip that handle and twist your own hand. So there's always pros and cons. But it's really it seems like in a lot of the cases of the Chinese weapons, it seems like they are kind of just longer versions of a one-handed sword anyway. So it does seem a lot easier to switch in that case. So just like you have European bastard swords, where it's not a full-length war sword, but it's definitely long enough for two-handed use. And then you get large long swords that really don't make much sense to use with one hand. The weight balance, handling is all kind of wrong for one-handed use. Let alone if you try to go Diablo Berserker and use a great sword with one hand, then you're just insane.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny.
Grab swords.
Yeah, and you know what? If this was a European sword, this would be considered a so-called bastard sword.
Yeah,
because
pretty much.
Because you got the two-handed grip, but it's a 32-inch blade.
Yeah.
Which some people would not even consider, like, some people would say, oh, you got a two-handed sword. And even some Chinese guys would be like, that's a two-handed sword. But there are others who goes, no, that's a one-handed sword with a two-handed grip. Because to them, that beast.
I would not want to use that with one hand, that's for sure.
That's insane. I mean, unless you're in Dark Souls, then you can get away with it. But yeah, there's some who would say that this is not a two-handed sword. This is a one-handed sword with a two-handed grip. Like a true two-handed sword would have a blade at least of 36 inches. And I've seen them. I used to own one, and I miss my old sword collection. So yeah, if the answer was yes to the second question, can you give tips on using the Jian in the aforementioned style I described? I think we've already kind of touched on that, like ways that you can use this. Basically, your one-handed techniques can be switched to two-handed and back again as long as your fundamentals are solid. There's no reason why you can't, like, boom, switch up to two, cut this way, long reach, boom. There's really no reason. And in fact, again, a lot of styles, basically, let me just put it this way, the quick and dirty of it. If you practice a Chinese form where your left hand is touching your wrist a lot as you do a motion, you can easily turn that into two hands. In fact, I'm really thinking that training was part of it. If you're going like this, and your wrist just happens to be, your hand happens to be touching here, it doesn't take much to just put your hand here to do the same motion. And then the thing that cracks me up is they'll say, oh, well, why is this touching the wrist? Oh, that's to help you push the sword forward. Wouldn't it be easier just to hold it here to push the sword forward? That makes more sense. It's basically giving you the option. You could do that one-handed, or you could do it two, but it works. So, yeah, it basically just, if you're practicing a Chinese form, a quick rule of thumb, if your left hand happens to be close to your right as you're doing the motion, there you go. You can easily adapt it for one and two hands. It works. And then the fourth question, like I said, he did send me four. I noticed you seem to make less distinction of two-handed use and one-handed use of a weapon when compared to HEMA practitioners. Can I elaborate more on my style? Again, I think I touched on that. I hate to try to kind of elaborate on my style as an example of what to do because, again, I don't feel like I'm qualified to be like, well, you know, I'm a grandmaster in this and I can tell you exactly. Nah, I'm still learning, you know, and there's a lot of holes in my education, unfortunately, when it comes to this thing. But what I will say from what I've basically understood is there is a distinction in Chinese martial arts between two-handed use and one-handed use, but they classify it with weapons, not necessarily styles. And then you have styles that kind of blend it all together, and they don't realize that they're doing it that way. Like they'll just think, this is the way we've always been doing it, but we just do it with one hand. Yeah, but those are obviously two-handed techniques you're doing. If I'm going to be like putting a label on my style personally, I just favor trying to practice Chinese techniques that I feel are still practical, which is a relative thing to say in an age of firearms. But if I was going to be using this to defend myself, I try to learn things that I feel are going to keep me alive. That's my personal interest. It's not that I'm planning on going out there with this sword to start chopping people up. It's just more that if I'm going to be practicing with this, I'd rather practice this the way it was basically more or less meant to be practiced. And my style lends toward that. I, you know, stick with forms that I think are practical, like Kunwu Jian, Sankai Jian. Those are fairly basic forms that actually teach, in my opinion, real application of how the weapon's supposed to be used. And interestingly enough, like I said, they can be adapted for one and two-handed use. That, you know, if your hand is here, you can do this. I don't see any reason why you can't. And in fact, many times I've seen that application done. Like, you know, the guy's stabbing this way, and when he's practicing, and then when he's actually fighting, I see him do that. And then there's a couple of forms that I've practiced that are actually pretty much two-handed forms. They're every now and then I'll see it done one-handed, but most of the time you've got two hands in the weapon. There's a 113 method sword that's pretty much a two-handed method. There's a Wudon method that's pretty much a two-handed sword method, and they're very practical. And those are the ones that I like training in. So that's. I hope that answered your question. Yeah, I guess my style kind of blends between one and two hands. I'm not primarily one or two-handed. I do kind of prefer one-handed because I feel like I'm a bit more versatile in that I can like use this hand to like quickly, you know, block off and like move your hand out the way and do that type of stuff. But I'm not afraid to switch up to two if I have to. I think that probably will answer the question a bit better. And there is some.
I didn't want to stop you. I have to go soon, but I just want to throw this quick question. Have you heard? Do you know about the what's it called? The indestructible umbrella, or it's a $100 umbrella made out of fiberglass, in some cases carbon fiber.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I have heard of it. I remember when I first heard of it, I'm like, I need to get that umbrella, but I've never actually like seen it. Somebody just told me about it.
Well, I'll go get it. It's pretty. The point of balance is about maybe 10 inches into the middle, so you have to kind of choke up on it.
Okay.
I'll go and get it.
Okay, cool. Good to see a really cool tool. And then we have Tyler Lalonde, who's always at my hangouts, and I'm pretty sure he's watching now. He sent me a bunch of questions. So I'm almost close to the end. In fact, I think actually, yeah, he's like the second to last person who sent a bunch of questions. And the last one was Jake C. Wolf, and then I'll probably get it.
Yeah, just a regular reinforced umbrella. It's sturdy enough to use as a walking stick, and it has a reinforced tip. That's all.
Yeah, I was eyeballing that thing occasionally.
Oh, you were?
Looks kind of interesting.
Okay, well, I'm going to get going now.
Okay. And I think Sword Sage's computer froze.
Oh, it looks like it.
Hi guys!
Are we the only ones left?
Seems so. The HEMA people are the only ones left and hang out about Eastern martial arts. Yay.
Well, I think it's about all kinds of things, isn't it?
I don't know.
Q&A. So, but of course,
I came in late.
Of course, he focuses mainly on those. So, do we have to take over the entertainment here now?
Oh, goodness me. I could just bring in our Chinese weapons, just show them. That might interest this crowd.
Yeah, I mean, your doll is right there, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, that hangout definitely has been plagued by some technical issues, for sure. Uh-oh. He's now completely left the chat. Well, so the only people left in the chat are guests.
Lovely.
That happened. So yes, if you're interested in Chinese weapons, then that is more along the lines. What's it called again? That's a willow leaf? No, wait. No.
Goose quill.
Goose quill.
Okay, I'm back.
Goose quill. There we go. That was a little weird. We were, for a moment, like we were the only ones in the chat.
Oh, cool! It's a tango! I just noticed that in the background. And Bo left, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I still haven't reviewed that one here.
Oh, my God. Always wanted one of those.
Show the tip.
Let's see.
Yep, it's a tango.
Mm-hmm.
I have always wanted one of
those.
those.
The review done, and I did some tests, and overall it's pretty good. I mean, it's nicely made and everything. That's Ronin who makes these.
Oh, okay.
And the only thing I don't particularly like about this, the Stingray here, and this one is pretty rough. And I noticed that. I also did some harder abusive tests to see how the blade holds up. The blade was just fine, but when cutting into hard targets, there's a hell of a lot of hand shock because it vibrates quite a bit, and with the rough texture, it really transfers pretty harshly onto the hand.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's nice.
Oh man, God, I've always wanted one of those.
You always wanted a Chinese katana?
The proto katana.
It is the proto katana, but I just happen to like the look of it. I like sleek designs like that, just simple, sleek. You know, not too much ornamentation. Though, the grip though does kind of worry me. It's something that I probably have to wear gloves with.
Glove would definitely be recommended. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world.
Look at that.
Yeah, that would rip my hands apart.
You can even see it stuck out there on the side.
It's certainly not the most comfortable, but again, with gloves that would be fine, and it handles well. It seems to be well made overall.
What?
Yes, you're right.
They actually make straight versions of those. In fact, the tongue dao, if I remember correctly, is supposed to be straight. Though the straight ones are actually the ones that I wanted to get my hands on. And I remember for a while, tongue Jian were pretty popular online, but I'm really starting to think that such a thing didn't really exist in the Tang Dynasty. I mean, or if it did, they were rare. Because most of the time when I look for historical examples, they all end up being the Dao. You know, those straight swords with the really squared off tip. And then I remember seeing on the market all the time the Tang Jian, which, again, because of the nice sleek stick design, I wanted one. But then I started looking for historical examples and couldn't really find any. Whatever. But I got to get back to answering that dude's question.
Well, we only started the weapon show because we didn't know what else to do.
Dude, I am so sorry about that. Like, all of a sudden, I just got a blue screen of death, which basically tells me that my overclocking is not stable yet. But I kind of knew that. I was still planning on doing some tweaking with it. And then later on this evening, I was going to do a final Prime 95 stress test. Considering I got a blue screen, I'm thinking I probably need to give it a little bit more voltage, I think. And I'm hoping that's, I'm trying to keep my voltage as low as I possibly can because it's already running kind of hot. I might have to put another CPU cooler on this thing or just say fuck it and go liquid cooling, but that's money that I don't have right now.
And I'm just looking at the time. I think we also need to get going because there's some other things we need to get done today. But at least we could be here for a little bit.
Yeah,
I was definitely interested to talk to you.
And I only have a few more questions to go through anyway, so if the audience doesn't mind me being the only one here in the video answering the questions, well, we'll get on with that. But yeah, if you guys have to get going, thanks very much for being here with me. It was definitely enjoyable.
Yep, thanks for having us.
You guys take care then.
Okay, you too. Take care.
See ya.
All right, so let me get to this next set of questions. Most of them are from Tyler Lalonde, who is always at my hangouts. Once again, thanks for being here, dude. I appreciate it. First one is, why do I see people in self-defense and martial arts doing attacks with no intent to harm the weapon, no intent to aim the weapon at the person? So when I ask, I always get their car hit them for real. Doing a strike realistically doesn't require you to hit them, but no, I'm wrong, I guess. I honestly have never really gotten that myself, considering that the training I got, you aimed at the person. That was the way I was trained. When you fought someone, especially when it came to the weapon, you aimed at the person. If you had no choice but to intercept the weapon, you intercepted it in a way so that you can get at the person. You didn't go for the weapon. That's movie fighting. I can sort of understand if you're unarmed and you're going up against somebody with a weapon, then I can sort of see the rationale of, okay, I need to stop the weapon first and get inside and then get them. But if you got a weapon and they got a weapon, most of the training that I tend to see, it's you go for the person. This weapon's a really good example. You will find pretty much a whole lot of teachers basically saying the highest level technique is you just counter and kill the guy as they're killing you. Not they're killing you, as they're attacking you. You don't just block. You don't block. You don't try to block. Like if they're making a stab, the highest level technique is to just simply step out the way and make a return stab at the same time. Or if they're making some type of cut and you step out the way and just hack at their forearm and then come inside and go for the body. That to them was the highest level technique. You didn't go for the weapon. You went for the person. And even sort of going for the weapon, if you notice, like, okay, here comes the weapon. I need to stop it. So I'm going to stop the weapon by hitting their hand. Not hitting the blade, hitting their hand. If you had to meet with their weapon, then they would have their weapon slide off. So, like, this is going to look kind of pathetic, but it's all I got. Take this pen and this pen. Pretend it's two sword guys. Ah! That's all I got. You got two guys right here. This guy is making a stab to hit this dude. Instead of this guy going clang, clang, he's just going to kind of intercept it just enough so that this weapon slides off while at the same time he's pushing in to hit this dude. I hope that made sense. Like, imagine you're stabbing at me, you in the audience, and I hold my weapon in a position so that I kind of use this part to parry your blade out the way, but I'm still keeping my point aimed at you so I can just push in. I'm not trying to, engage with your weapon first and go in. I'm just go in. So the only reason why I would see people in self-defense and martial arts doing attacks to, not aimed at the person is either lack of knowledge of how to actually use the freaking thing, or maybe they're looking at it from an unarmed standpoint. It's the only thing I can think of, but if you got a weapon in your own hand, it's not about, okay, then stop this weapon here. No, the more I look at traditional arts, whether it be Japanese, Chinese, European, it's always about get at the guy. The modern stuff I'm noticing a lot of go at the weapon. And considering that for all of our fears of crime and terrorism and all that, we're living in relatively safe times. Be honest, how many of you guys have ever actually been in a fight where you had to use a weapon against somebody else? I'm sure there's a couple of you in the audience who have that experience, but it's quite a few of you, not a large amount. So we're living in an age where we don't really have the knowledge of weapon on weapon as much as it used to be. So it's not important in our minds. And a lot of these martial arts schools or self-defense places, since they don't have that, mindset, yeah, they're most likely going to be teaching it wrong because they don't know. And they don't really have the mindset to know. The guys who would know would be military dudes, bodyguards, that sort of thing. And those are the types of guys who aren't necessarily going to be opening up a dojo in your corner, in the corner on your block or something. So I guess that's my answer for that. And keep in mind, that's just my answer for that. I could be dead wrong, but that's my take on it. And you're also saying the big wide swings. Why do they train for the dumbest attacker and the last likely attacker? Most attacks are done by average people with average intelligence, and the biggest one of all, actual intent. Not all of that is done for stupidity. I mean, yeah, it's obvious that, nobody's going to be coming at you, for instance, with a knife like this. That doesn't happen. We know that. No one's going to be like, here, and then wait for you to, block their arm and all. We know that. But sometimes they teach people that to get them used to, like, especially beginners. It's to get them used to the idea of an attack coming at them. Remember, when you first throw somebody, like, okay, we're going to be teaching you two-man drills. Here comes the weapon coming at you. Ha! Now, if we're going to immediately do it the normal way, they're just going to get hit, especially if they're not used to having to deal with that before. How many times have you seen, okay, go, do this. Hell, you got to train them just not to flinch, just starting out. Forget about teaching them how to properly deal with a properly thrown blow. They got to learn how to freaking not blink first, not flinch. They got to get over that initial fear. So give them a nice big wind up to deal with, like something that is telegraphed at them that they can easily deal with. And then after a while, I feel like a badass. Yeah, you give them confidence. Then you throw reality at them. Okay, now get in the ring. Now they got to learn how to deal with real attacks. But they now have the confidence of knowing, okay, I got hit, so what? I can hit back. Many times that's what they're going to do. The beginners, the big flashing movements, or the really big, wide, dumb swings, train them to that just to build their confidence up, not necessarily to give them proper technique. It's just more like, get used to limbs coming at you. And now that you're used to it, now this is what the limbs are really going to be doing. Now you need to prepare. This is what real fighting is. We've taken you out of kindergarten. Here's real fighting. Many times that's the reason why they do it. Other times the reason why they do it is simply because, well, they themselves don't know any better, or, like sometimes to wow the crowd. Like, I'm pretty sure you've seen in many demos and demonstrations, they'll have somebody come with big wide swings, and that impresses a crowd. It's kind of the same thing like with movies, and the reason why movie fighting isn't real, so to speak. You see a whole lot of flashy stuff, but it's not real technique, and somebody who knows real martial arts will be looking at that going, you could have hit him 3 times already. But if they actually show like real fighting on the screen, people, the average audience person, the average moviegoer isn't going to be impressed. It's like, what happened? It's over already? Like, it didn't look like he did anything. It just looked like he tripped him. Like, real technique is simple. If somebody's going to be making a move, I'm not going to be doing like nah. A punch is coming in, you just house the dude, drop him to the ground. that type of stuff, unless he's going through a room full of guys and they want to show how quickly he can take out a room full of people, they usually don't show stuff like that because it doesn't, it doesn't look as impressive. And it's the same thing if you're, showing off your school or showing off your martial art that you teach to your students to a room full of people. They want to see the big flashy stuff. So they'll have some guy come like, and then, the other guy like, and do all this crazy stuff to tie them up. It impresses people, but that's not necessarily the real technique. So that's me playing devil's advocate on why you sometimes see that crap. But I'm not going to leave out the fact that there are also places where that's all they know. They don't really know real fighting technique. They know some katas, they know some patterns, basic kicks and stuff like that, and then some two-man drills, and then that's it. And when it comes to actually applying the art, they don't really know how to do it other than, the really dumb demo way. And then when they get into a real fight, they get lumped up because that's not how people really fight. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. Okay. Then yes, with my last video, I mentioned laws that Tyler had mentioned in the comment section of my last video about, the breakdown of society, that, laws that inhibit people to protect themselves are a problem. And he's wondering, would I consider that to be the next step of the decline of society? Are laws that keep people from protecting themselves, say with weaponry, a good sign that society is breaking down? I hate to say it, but no, not really. If you look throughout history, there is always, like in many different cultures, you tend to see this struggle back and forth between governments or ruling bodies arming themselves and everyone else being able to arm themselves at about the same level. And there's always this struggle on who gets more of the weaponry or who gets the superior weaponry. And usually most times it's the ruling body that has all the best toys. And they'll always try to find ways to kind of limit the public from being on an equal plane with them. You see this in Japan and China, especially. Like, hell, there was a time in China where the government had taken up just about all the metal for themselves to make weaponry, to the point that when the peasants had finally made a major revolt that brought in the next dynasty, they were fighting with wooden sticks and shit. Like, literally, it was that bad. Because there's always this whole thing of, like, we have the weapons and we keep you guys in line. Now, sometimes, I'll play devil's advocate and say there's, benevolent reasons for that. You guys don't need the weapons. We have the weapons, and we will protect you from the others who have the weapons. You have no reason for that. And they're thinking of a mindset of, if you guys have them, that's going to cause instability. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're not. But there's always been this back and forth, even in, like, even in times when things are most stable. It isn't necessarily that, the societies that were most stable were the ones where everybody had weapons, equal weapons on an equal plane. Nah, not really. No, now I will say that if you start seeing, governments getting more and more totalitarian on who gets weaponry, that's a really good sign of not necessarily societal breakdown, but totalitarianism coming in. It's a different sign. When I'm saying society breaking down, I'm not necessarily talking about like totalitarian rule or like oppressive governments or regimes. I'm talking just more about the fact that just the basic glue of society itself is breaking down. What causes human beings to come together and trust one another to the point where they can actually, sustain each other and sustain the group that they're in, that's breaking down. But that's the thing I'm talking about. The nature of governments themselves and whether they limit weaponry or limit how people can protect themselves, that's kind of something else. It could be linked to social breakdown, because we could say that as society starts breaking apart and people are more distrustful and you start getting these little outbreaks of people saying, F authority, then the authority might start clamping down on people. And then in order to keep their order, then they can say that, okay, now we need to limit how much weaponry these people have to protect themselves, and that back and forth. But that seems to be more of a symptom than a cause, at least from my perspective. That, again, this is just my perspective. I could be dead wrong. So, all right, I'm going to try to lump these two up together. It says, can I talk about why Krav Maga and other styles think moving into the attack and taking a hit is better than evading anything else? So they believe the tip of the weapon transfers the most force because it moves the fastest, but they forget it is it has lost the last amount of mass. And he's also asking, why do people think a demo doesn't have to be realistic? Okay, the demo thing, that should kind of go with the last question. Why do some people think a demo doesn't have to be realistic? Again, demonstrations are usually done to wow the crowd, not necessarily to show off real technique. I know in these days, everyone's thinking to be more like, these days it seems to almost be like this kind of like this craze to like, I'm the most realistic. I'm the military, you know, my stuff's gonna be used in military combative stuff. My stuff can be used in the streets. Like everyone's like worried about realism and really focusing on it. It seems to be a big thing. But to be honest, it's always been a thing. But it's just like kind of moving away from so-called traditional arts and moving towards the modern arts that work. But even those modern things, when you see them when they're in demos, you will sometimes see stuff that's a bit unrealistic. And the reason is simple. The average layperson isn't going to be all that impressed with real technique. I mean, they might be impressed a little bit with, like, wow, he took him down fast. But if your whole art's like that, they're gonna be like, well, where are the flashy kicks? Where are the really cool uppercuts and stuff? Where are the really cool 9-stage hand lock techniques that, you know, people are used to seeing? You know, they want to see that sizzle with the steak. They want to see all this flashy stuff. So that tends to be why you see a lot of these demos doing that type of crap. Sometimes people also set demos up not necessarily to show off real technique or to wow the crowd, but more to show the sophistication of the person practicing it. They'll show off some technique that isn't necessarily practical, but it shows the technical prowess of the person doing it. Just to show like, this is the high level type stuff this guy's able to do. It's not necessarily done for, you know, practicality's sake. It's more the sense of, wow, that guy must be damn good to do that. So that means you guys must train hard, huh? There must be something. They're trying to show the sophistication, you know, of their particular art and their level of achievement in the art. It's not necessarily realistic, but it may impress you just on a technical level. Like, okay, for instance, like, say, you know, how many of you guys watch fighting game tournaments or know something about like Street Fighter, Tekken, and all that type of stuff? Those of you who play fighting games know that generally when it comes to combos, you got the stuff that is your bread and butter combos, the stuff that will work. You can use it in a high pressure situation. And then you got those flashy combos that look amazing. You know, it's hard as hell to do. It takes a lot of technical prowess, but it's impractical as hell to use in a real freaking tournament. Like when you're fighting somebody else, you are not going to get that setup. But if, you know, if you put it in practice mode and do that stuff, oh my God, that was freaking awesome. You hit him like 150 freaking times. Like, that's what I mean. Like, you'll sometimes see demos where they're kind of doing that, where they're showing off something that it's impressive as hell. And it's done not necessarily to show the realism of the technique, but more to show, you know, the technical prowess of the person doing it. Again, this is not to give them any slack. I'm just saying why it's being done. We can argue whether it's worth it or not, but this is just to answer the question of why you tend to see that stuff. And then finally, the whole Krav Maga thing. I hesitate to talk about this because I don't really know that much about Krav Maga. So I can easily just put my foot in my mouth trying to talk about what I think, you know, well, they're doing it because of this. I don't know. And I'm not going to, you know, be stupid enough to try to, you know, pass some type of judgment or criticism on an art that I know very little about. I mean, I know of it, I've seen it, I'm impressed by it, but their techniques and their fight philosophy, I know very little about. So I can't really, you know, talk about it all that much. But I will say that there is a school of thought that is like, well, it's just better to move in and take the hit and take them down, because they're kind of betting on, you know, their own physique to win the day. Again, the average civilian isn't well conditioned. Let's be honest. I don't care how much you're able to bench press. If you're unless you really condition yourself for fighting, like, you know, get your stamina up, be able to take blows, the average guy is just not, you know, he's not at the level of, say, a fighter. So if somebody who's training in, say, an intense art like Krav Maga is properly trained in the way it should be, he could probably like look at a civilian guy like throwing punches and I can take that hit, fuck it, boom, and then just house the dude. That could be the mindset. Again, this is me speculating because I don't know. But it could also stem, however, from an old school of thought that I see in a lot of different fighting arts, where they feel it's a lot better to just intercept the blow and go in than to constantly back off. And I can attest to that. Like, it makes a lot, many times, again, it kind of goes back to the whole sword thing of the attacks coming in, and you just intercept just enough so that the blade slides out the way, but at the same time, you're already moving in. You're not taking the blow, obviously, but you're just drawing it off just enough so that you can get inside. And the reason for thinking this is simple. When somebody attacks, they're open. So they're like, that's the best time. If I wait until after they attack, they have time to recover. I want to get them while they're still open. When somebody makes an attack, like when they're here, you know, they got their arms up, their guard up, it's hard to get in. But once that fist is out, or once that leg is out, they're open. If you can get them right at that moment, you got them at a perfect opportunity. And so many arts try to find ways to hit the dude just as they attack. The Chinese even have a saying for that: move second, arrive first. So you wait to see what the guy is going to do, and then you instantly come up with a counter that intercepts the blow, or it just goes right in and bashes them while they're still in mid-attack. Some schools of thought believe that, well, you just take the hit and go in, just bulldozer right through them. Others, they'll sidestep, or others, they'll slip. Personally, I think the slipping method is probably the most effective, because sidestepping a blow is, many times, it just doesn't work. You're not fast enough. But being able to, like, you see the blow coming in, you just get the hand just in time so it kind of glances off, and that gives you the in to go in, you know, that makes a bit more sense. And that way you're catching them when you're catching them when they're at their most vulnerable. The method of taking the hit while going in could just simply be another way to do that. But by and large, I see so many, you know, so many people seem to come to the conclusion that get them while they're attacking. You know, don't just stand there defending all day, and, you know, just get in, just boom, get inside and hit them while they're hitting. So, final question on the list, and this is from Jake C. Wolf. And this one I kind of found rather interesting. It goes, if a medieval knight and a feudal Japanese samurai in full battle gear saw one another, would they be able to see who each other was in their respective societies? By this, I mean, would they be able to tell that, you know, each other was from the noble warrior caste just by how they dressed, the ornateness of their weapons and armor? And he asks this in this way because he says he's kind of tired of the whole knight versus samurai debate that people keep bringing up now and again. But he was more interested in how the cultures would react to one another. Would they be able to tell whether, you know, somebody is of the warrior caste or not? And I think that's a fair question. I think that's a pretty good one. So I think more so than the quality of the weapons and armor, what would give them away would be the way they hold themselves. Fighting nobility always has a way they stand and act, somewhere between pride and arrogance, the I am nobility, I'm better than you commoners type of vibe, just standing there. Body language does play a lot into it. It's sort of how you can kind of walk into a room and you can automatically tell who has confidence and who doesn't. You know, the body language says a lot. So, and when you are, you know, warriors or fighters or whatever, when they train, they don't just simply train their fighting techniques. They also train their perceptions to be more aware, because sometimes that's something you have to be aware when you're living the type of life where you can get jumped and killed at any moment. And a lot of these guys had jobs where that could happen. So you have to be able to, you know, sense the mood of a room and sense body language. And I'm thinking that one fighter from one area and then, you know, another fighter or warrior from another area meeting each other, they may not recognize, like, this guy's obviously a foreigner. But just from the way they carry themselves, you can get an idea of this guy is a man of you know, he definitely has some bearing to him, or the way he's holding that weapon, he's obviously used to it. And they could probably, I mean, I think it may be too much to say that if a samurai happened to bump into a knight, they'll say, oh, that guy's a warrior from his country. But they'll probably have a good idea. I don't think they'll like 100% know, but they'll have a really good idea that whoever this guy is, he can handle himself. Like, he's not wearing that just for ornamentation, or like the way you can tell. You can kind of tell. It's funny, even in these days and times, you know, like I'm not at the level that I used to be at, but I still sometimes when I can go into a room and I'm hanging with people, and I can kind of just tell when somebody has training. It's a certain way they stand, or the look. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's well built. So it's just like, okay, the way that I can kind of tell the guy has a little bit of training. I'm not too sure in what, but they got something. You can kind of tell just from their body language, just from visual cues. You can get an idea of that. So hopefully that answers that question. I think, yeah, if a samurai or a Japanese in some hypothetical situation, a samurai or, a samurai warrior or a medieval European knight, and again, I would say which knight, because it was, German, English, French. I'm thinking they would know. They would have a good idea. So I think that's about it for this. I'm now trying to see if I can try to catch up on some of these questions, because there's a bunch of questions here in the under the video, and this is probably what caused my blue screen, because I'm now looking under the video trying to see if you guys left me any questions. And so that means I have to have the video streaming at the same time, and I'm trying to stop that from happening. And of course, the easiest thing to say is because I also overclock, so that's the simplest reason why. Oh, somebody was telling me for the whole clock speed, a good program to try is MSI Afterburner. Yeah, I probably should get that. Right now, what I'm using I'm using Prime 95 to stress test, and I know before anybody says anything, I know that Prime 95 is more of a torture system. This is more torture testing than stress testing, but I find that sometimes basically I'm worried about the summer. That's the main reason why I'm using Prime 95 to test my overclock. I don't have much air conditioning in this room, and even though I got a pretty good aftermarket CPU cooler, it's still an air-based one. So I am trying my best to keep my voltages as low as I can to keep the temperatures low. But that also means that I got to stress test this thing to high temperatures to make sure that in case things do get high, it'll be able to handle it. So far I'm doing okay, but that blue screen that I had just a little while ago worries me. So I'm going to be testing it out again to see what's going on. But yeah, I'm using Prime 95 for that. I'm also, what else am I using? I was using AMD Overdrive for some light testing, but I know it's not ideal. I really wish it was. I mean, I'm using an AMD chip. You'd think that an AMD software would be great for stress testing it and seeing if the overclock is stable, but I find that it's a little bit too lenient. It's passing way, let's put it this way. When I was running that, for a good 30 minutes on overclock I did last night with, it was a bit of a higher overclock. It's like, oh, there's no problem. Then I run OCCT and immediately it's like, oh, no, you want to take this down. So yeah, Overdrive is decent, I guess, for doing a quick checkup, but it's definitely not the main thing that you should use, in my opinion. So I'm mostly running Prime 95 to test my overclocks, and OCCT also to check to make sure everything's stable. And once I get everything set up just right, what I basically want to do is run Prime 95 overnight on a blend. And if I wake up the next day and my computer still, it hasn't crashed, we're good to go. Though I will say that I did play Dark Souls 3 today at max settings with this overclock. It didn't crash. It stayed stable. Frame rate was stable. So I'm pretty much there. I just think I need to do probably a little bit more tweaking with the voltages, considering that blue screen that just popped up. All right. So 50 Stitches Steel asks, what are my thoughts on the Karambit as a self-defense knife? I wish I had gotten to this question when everyone was here, because you were asking all the panel members, and unfortunately, Skull and Kara are no longer here, so I can only speak for myself. But I like Karambits. A friend of mine trains with Karambit, and he showed me some basic stuff, and yeah, I like that knife. What I will say, however, is that if you have no really good hand-to-hand skills whatsoever, a Karambit is probably not going to be. A Karambit is just going to be just another knife for you if you've got no hand-to-hand skills. If, however, you have some really good hand-to-hand fighting skills, particularly when it comes to, like, trapping or, at least being able to ward off blows and slipping in, a Karambit is just a really good tool that will enhance your hand-to-hand fighting techniques. Because basically with the Karambit, all you're doing is just, your motions with the Karambit are just to lock the other guy's limbs in place while you're whacking them with your other hand. At least that's the way I've usually seen it done. So if you already got good hand-to-hand technique, the Karambit's just going to enhance it. If you don't really have any, the Karambit's just going to be another freaking knife. Because you don't have anything to add to it. You're just using a blade. And if you don't know how to use a blade properly and you got no good hand-to-hand technique, the Karambit's just not going to be that great a tool. You're just going to be like, well, what's the big deal? Because you don't have, you don't have a good method to use with it. Okay. And by the way, Belgian Dan, if you're wondering why, and Captain, why the hell is there no chat window? Yeah, I've been wondering that for the past 2 years. I really don't get why the hell they don't have a live chat option for live hangouts. Twitch does it. 2 other old streaming programs that trying to remember, Blog TV had it. There was another really old one that I completely forgot. It's no longer around. Like it was a common thing. If you were having a live chat with a group of people, you had the live chat thing on the side. It was just like clockwork. Like if you have shoes, you have shoelaces. If you have peanut butter, you got jelly. If you got live streaming, you got the live chat on the side. You'd think that was what would, it would be standard, but for some strange reason, Google's like, nah. Why would you want, why would you want people watching your video to be able to comment to you and you be able to see it easily at the same time? That nobody wants that. We know best. Sure you do. I don't know why it's as frustrating for me as it is for you guys. Take it up with Google. And, well, we know what that's like, trying to take things up with Google. Okay, I'm going to go through this last one, and then there's one question that was sent to me a long time ago that I never got to answer the dude, so I'm really hoping if he happens to be seeing this, and I don't have his name on hand, it's the South Shaolin question. If you do, you know who you are. You asked me about why is the South Shaolin myth, so prevalent? Is it real? Is there any truth to it? I'm going to answer that after I answer this one. So I didn't forget you, man. I just forgot your name. But Musashi XD, let's see. It says, when it comes to video games, I know all of you tend to prefer more realistic systems, or at least mechanics that adhere to the fundamentals of fighting, spacing, timing, and technique. However, when it comes to games with systems that don't even come close to mimicking real combat, like turn-based or active time battle systems, what sort of things do you like to see in terms of them having something to do with real-life combat, apart from the obvious, like resourcefulness? Or do you just completely avoid them like I tend to? Okay, that's the thing about me. My games don't have to necessarily be realistic when it comes to combat. I mean, I prefer it, but it doesn't have to be. Like, I play freaking Devil May Cry, for God's sakes. You can't tell me that game has a realistic fighting system. Okay, I like what I like. It just so happens that a lot of the games I like do have a realistic, or at least try to be realistic when it comes to fighting. Like they kind of ground it a bit. And when I see that, I really appreciate it. Like Dark Souls, I really appreciate the fact that the combat is grounded. It isn't necessarily realistic, but it's, I mean, come on. Guys running around with oversized way-handers, like bigger than they are, that's not realistic. But I like how grounded the combat is. And, since it's, in that aspect, since it's similar to real fighting, I appreciate it. The Bushido Blade series is still one of my favorite fighting games of all time, specifically because they tried to make it as realistic as possible. That said, because they did that, it's not a very easy game for people to get into. Like, if I was going to try to get friends of mine to play fighting games, Bushido Blade would not be the first one I'd show them, simply because of how complex the controls are. I mean, once you get it, then yeah, you can have some fantastic fights, but until then, yeah, it's just way too daunting, and getting killed with one hit and all that just turns people off. So again, it's it's just that I like what I like. I like video games that are just well constructed. I play a variety of them. It's not just games like Dark Souls. I also play Hyper Light Drifter, for instance, is a game that's caught my attention for the past couple of months. What was another one? Hand of Fate. That's a fantastic freaking game. If you guys ever heard of that one, I guess you can sort of say it has a grounded fighting system. Basically, it's like they took the fighting game. It's like they took the fighting engine from the Arkham Knight games and put it into a roguelike RPG. It makes sense. Trust me, it works. It works. It's a fun game. As far as turn-based games, I never really understood the hatred for it. I will admit that lately I don't really see a reason why you need it anymore, but I don't really hate it. It's obsolete. I'll admit that. It's kind of obsolete. It's kind of archaic, but I don't hate it. If the game itself is good, I'll still play it. Like freaking Chrono Trigger is an ancient game with, and it had a sort of time battle system. And that's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I like it better than, I actually hold the Chrono Trigger, that one game, Chrono Trigger, I hold that higher up on my list than any Final Fantasy game that's come out. Though Tactics comes pretty close. Tactics comes really close. If I'm going to talk about what do I like to see in combat systems, just that they're at least fun and have something to hold my interest. They can't be so easy that all I have to do is mash one button to win. But they can't be so complicated that I find myself going, why didn't they just do this? Like the most complicated type system I ever want to see in any type of action game is what I saw in Bushido Blade. That's as far as I want it to go. Once you start getting kind of ridiculous, like for instance, having like certain actions tied to your right analog stick instead of making that the camera, like doing stupid stuff like that, that's when you start to lose me. Like when you start trying to F with a proven formula that works, that's when I tune out. Whatever system you decide to put into whatever game you have, it has to be fun, it has to be intuitive, and it has to be something that holds my interest. If you can do that, I'll play your game. It doesn't necessarily have to be realistic. The Devil May Cry series, again, that is not a realistic fighting game engine in the least. You cannot juggle people in the air with bullets. It just doesn't happen. But the combo system is a lot of fun and it's intuitive. You find yourself like, okay, if I do this move and I do the stinger and I pop them in the air, jump them in the air, hit them a couple of times, throw them down to the ground, come down, pick them back up, swing them, like, stuff like that is fun. And you constantly keep trying to think of new ways to beat the crap out of people on the screen. That holds my interest. That's what I want to see in those type of games because they're games. If I wanted something so realistic that it's going to be just like real fighting, I'll go outside and spar. And I do have people I can spar with, though I haven't been around them in a while. But yeah, if it was like, hey, dude, this Friday, I'll meet up over in your house. Let's spar. If I want something completely realistic that's not straight up real life, we'll go in the backyard and go a few rounds. When it comes to a video game, it's nice to see a realistic fighting game engine. But again, if I was really into just that, all I'd be doing is playing UFC fighting games or something. And that's not what I do. All right. And now this last one, because now it's 7:48. And I did say that we're going to be going from 1 hour to 2 hours at the most. So, actually, I just noticed. Actually, I'm just updating this because I just noticed there were a couple more questions. But let me see. Newest first. Maybe the live chat is disabled by default. No, there is Gilgamesh. There is, as far as I can tell, I have not been able to find the option to have the live chat. I have looked like crazy. The closest thing I have is the Q&A, which I just realized I should have set up the Q&A because then you could have put your guys' questions in that way. But as far as having a straight up live chat, there's no options on the side. There's just none. It's frustrating as hell, but it's just not there. How would I? Man, now I'm getting a whole bunch of questions, and it's toward the end. You see what caused the blue screen before messing with more clock settings. Okay, I'm gonna go through these really quick. Jeremiah Sprague is asking, where do you find well-made Chinese swords? There aren't that many places. That's one of the reasons why I'm trying to look and find them and then do reviews so that you guys won't have to do all the hard work. Right now, there's two places that I would go to check out their weaponry, like easy places to go. Like you could try to look up Chinese forges, and there are a couple of places that list online, but be prepared to wade through a whole lot of garbage before you get to the good shit. If you just want to find something quick, there are two places I would recommend to find a Chinese sword that will probably be worth your time. The first is Cult of Athena. Their Chinese weapons section is actually pretty respectable. Some are kind of expensive. There are a couple of others I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, but they point blank tell you which ones are battle worthy and which ones are straight up ornamental. But they also have some really good weapons at decent prices, around the $200 range or so, $100, $150 range and up, that I actually think might be worth it. In fact, I'm trying to save some money so I can buy one of those to review. And between you and me, though Skull will probably watch this later, if I get that sword, then I want to ship it over to him as well, just so he can get an idea of what a Jian is like. But I'm only going to want to do that to have him see what it's like if I think the sword is worth something, because he hasn't held something like this before, or one of these. And I would really love to like send him something that's, decent like that, so he can get an idea of what the weapon is like and how similar it is to his own. So that's something I'm planning down the line. But anyway, yeah, one, try Cult of Athena and Sword Buyer's Guide. They've been increasing their Chinese weapon selection, and there's a couple of stuff in there that I think is worth it. I did have to say that I was like, I want to notice the cold steel thing there, but that's just me. I personally, okay, I don't think cold steel is garbage, but I think you can get better. That's all I'm going to say about it. But they do have some other stuff there that's worth it. So those are two places that you can try to find a Chinese weapon easily. Now, as far as like, oh, I want to go like, to a dedicated Chinese forge or something, there aren't that many good ones around. The few that were around, some of them have disappeared. And I've been just doing a lot of homework trying to find something decent. I think I may have found one, but I need to do a little bit more homework before I recommend them. So yeah, in the meantime, try the Chinese section in Cult of Athena and the Sword Buyer's Guide store. And, hopefully you'll find something decent there. Captain asks, how were Chinese swords used in battles against pole arms? Very sparingly. They didn't like. It's funny how many two-person forms are spear or polearm against a sword. The reason why there's so many isn't because they enjoyed it. It was because, in case you're fucked, this is what you do. If you were in the battlefield and you lost your spear and all you had was your sidearm, which is your sword or your saber, and someone's coming at you with a polearm, you're like, oh, shit. And so there were a lot of techniques in two-person forms to deal with it. And the basic technique was get inside. Don't waste too much time dealing with the tip of their weapon. Just get inside. The saber, it was pretty simple. If you got a shield in this hand, use that to block the thrust, slide your shield across the shaft, grab the goddamn thing and freaking shank them or hack them. If you don't have a shield, when the tip is coming in or if the weapon's coming in, you clank it out the way like that. I don't have a saber to demonstrate, but just like pretend this is a saber. Weapons coming in this way. Basic technique, just one, whack the thing out the way, grab the shaft of the person's arm, and follow through with the attack. Get inside quick. That was their whole mentality. Just get in there. Because the longer you stay outside there, outside of the shaft range, the higher the chance you're going to die. Usually you are going to die. The spear moves fast. Just a quick, and you're dead. Pole arms are a bit slower, but there's still that heavy blow, and you don't want to just stand there and block that because, oh shit, I'm dead. So it was all about just get inside. Once you get past that killing point, the blade, the business end, you're golden. But then rail your weapon against the shaft so you can get inside and hack the dude, and so you can also kind of control the shaft to keep it from hitting you. And usually they also say aim for the hand, aim for that forward hand, the person holding the weapon or the spear or whatever. get inside. If you can't grab the freaking thing, at the very least, keep your weapon against theirs to keep the, between you and them, and slide your weapon, rail it against the shaft so you can hit their hand. That's going to cause pain or disable them. Then you got them. But it's like, whatever you do, just get inside. And don't just stand there and try to block, because you'll die. That was the basic way it was done. It was not a favorable situation in the least. Shadow Storm quickly asks, basic self-defense, what I think is the easiest martial art to pick up in terms of instant practicability, or at least be able to be used early on with basic defense in mind? Go to a boxing gym. I say this all the time. I mean, I love Chinese martial arts because I grew up watching Kung Fu movies and I love the movements. But if you don't have that much money, or you just want to get something that's easily accessible and is going to teach you basically how to defend yourself, go to a boxing gym. Go to a place that's going to, at least train you to be able to fight 3 rounds, to condition you for that, show you how to slip and do a punch. Boxing, I don't care what anyone says, that is a really good practical art to learn if you don't want to invest a whole lot of crazy time learning stances and all that type of stuff, and you just want to be able to use your hands with proper skills. Go to a boxing gym. They're cheaper than the martial arts school. It's not like, martial arts school where you got people faking stuff like, I trained under Grandmaster Lee and this, that. A boxer, whether he's like you, the credentials are right there. He fought this many fights. The coach has trained this many people. You see people there. Everyone in there is learning a practical art. You are going to go into the ring sooner or later and have to use your skills practically. Take a boxing. If that doesn't convince you, how about this? The fact that during the Republican era in China, when many Chinese martial arts masters were trying to think of ways of teaching people how to fight and coming up with new ways of training Chinese martial arts, they took a look at boxing and went, hey, these guys actually have a method of teaching people how to punch practically faster than us. We might as well adapt this. And that's why Sanchu looks the way it does. If those guys can see the practicality of boxing, who are we to argue? You want something quick, it's quick and dirty, practical, that you can apply it quickly? Take up boxing. That's my advice. So now, before we end this is it's now 7:56, so I'm gonna have to cut this off soon, but I didn't forget that South Shaolin question, so I'm gonna try to touch on this as fast as I can. This is one of the questions that was asked of me months ago that I never got around to. And I really apologize for that, and I also apologize for getting your name, but I'm going to touch on this here, and I do plan on making a video about this as well. But it's on South Shaolin, because so many myths, so many stories happen to surround the whole Southern Shaolin Temple thing, to the point where people pretty much just spit this out, with no, like it's fact, straight up, yeah, there was a South Shaolin, and a bunch of rebels were there, and they harbored people who wanted, who were against the Qing Empire and wanted to bring back the Mings, and the Qings didn't like them and went over and burned the temple down, and that's where we get Wing Chun from, and Hung Gar and all that, and there's really no evidence of that. I'm sorry, but there isn't. And when I say there's no evidence of that, I'm not talking about there's no evidence of the fact that these styles came from Southern Shaolin. I mean, there is little evidence that there was a Southern Shaolin monastery. The only things we have to go on that it may have existed are stories, folklore, oral tradition. That's it. There are no records. There are no, no old news reports on this. There are no government records. There's nothing. Nothing about this Southern Shaolin Temple. So that's not good. If you're trying to state that this was a real place and with real technique, and you're trying to prove it, the fact that we can't really find any physical evidence for it, nor any real documentation on that, no historical documentation, no official documentation, no government stuff, nothing, that's a problem. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's just a straight up myth. I think there might have been something. Maybe there were a bunch of monks that came from the Northern Shaolin Temple, because that's the idea is that there were a bunch of monks from the north, the actual Shaolin Temple in the north, came down, established their monastery in the south. The reasons given to this vary. Some say it was to spread Zen Buddhism. Some say it was to have a military garrison there. It depends on who you talk to. Maybe there were a few who were sent down there. Maybe they had their own little group or something. But there's just no real evidence that it was there and what they did. And considering all the stories that were made up, especially like, you know, there's all these stories of heroism and tall tales about this person, that hero you need to respond to, this group, this secret society that was popping up during the rebellions of the Qing Dynasty, and especially after the Qing Dynasty when it fell, and then you had the Boxer Rebellion and all these superstitious thoughts. You get all that stuff mixed in. It can be really hard to separate fact from fiction. And when we do that, we find very little fact. And unfortunately, there's really no fact that there was a Southern Shaolin Temple there. But for the sake of argument, let's just say that maybe there was something. Was it a monastery? We don't know. Whether it was just a group of guys, we don't know. The problem I have in terms of its significance to Chinese martial arts is that the arts that supposedly came from that temple don't look anything like Shaolin Kung Fu. They really don't. There will, of course, Chinese martial arts, there are some universal themes. And you're always going to find certain threads. You're always going to find certain common denominators. But in terms of the structure, Shaolin Temple has distinct forms. Granted, they got them from elsewhere, but they kind of jumbled arts from here and there and everywhere. Like Shaolin Temple, like I've stated before, was almost like the Library of Alexandria for martial arts. They just grabbed shit and archived it there. Like you went to there and you found somebody who trained in this style, that style, whatever style, this style. That's why there's so much stuff there. They just collected styles like people collected stamps. This is why I said before in the video that they didn't really have their own flavor. They did have a kind of very stilted way of fighting though, but this can be seen in two forms, three forms. The small red fist, the big red fist, and Lohan style. Those three forms, which are sort of like people call it a long fist, and it kind of is, but it's more like a middle fist. Like they don't extend that far, but you can tell they got it from long fist type movements. That was the core Shaolin techniques that they got from other long fist arts and then made their own. That's the core style. You look at the structure from those styles, they all are pretty similar. You look at Lohan style, you look at Lohan form, you look at Dao Hong Chuan or Xiao Hong Chuan, you know, big long fist, big red fist, little smaller red fist. You look at the structure of those styles and you see a common theme, a common way to distribute blows, to move, how they stand. Then you look at Wing Chun or Hung Gar and they don't look the same. Now, if you got a bunch of monks in the north who came down to the south to teach their arts to other people, you would think that there would be some kind of link to those arts there, but there are none. They don't look the same. Wing Chun does not look like Lohan Fist or you know, or any of those any of the other two. Now some people say, well, they just invented a new one. What do you think? The long fist styles that they got elsewhere is what they took from in order to make Lohan's the Lohan form or the two red fist forms. They made those up and they followed a certain structure. Now, if they were going to make up a whole new style, they would still do it in the context of what they already knew. So why then would they come up with something that looked completely different from what they supposedly already knew? That makes little sense. And for anyone who's going to be arguing with this, I'm picking Wing Chun for a reason. Right now, there are people desperately trying to research Wing Chun's origins, and they have not been able to find anything concrete. They tried going the Shaolin route, and it ended up being a dead end. They could find no real links, partially because they can't find any real evidence of a Southern Shaolin temple to begin with, and another is for the reasons I just described. Wing Chun looks a lot more like the styles that were practiced in the South to begin with. Hung Gar, Lop Gar, a lot of those styles have a certain structure that you see in the styles in the South, period. Like it looks like those styles kind of just developed from that region, from fighters there who fought a certain way. Just like in the North, you got styles that developed a certain way because of the styles that were proliferating there. There's a certain school of thought or theory, a certain structure that you can see, a common thread. In the South, there's a common thread with their styles. In fact, the only style in the South that I can think of that looks a bit like a so-called Northern long fist style would be Choi Lafoot. That style, you see more long-range movements. You see like more long-range kicks and things like that. But even that style, they didn't necessarily connect it to Southern Shaolin. They connected it to a monk. And the guy who named it Choi Lafoot, he named it that way to honor the monk that he trained from. But he didn't link it directly to a Southern Shaolin temple. He said it was a Shaolin monk from up there, from the North, and I learned from him. And then I combined his stuff with what I knew, Southern stuff, and we got Choi Lafoot. So even there, we got a problem. So if you're asking, so why did this myth spread? Well, the same reason why any myth spreads, because it was a good story and people bought into it. And it also would propel a lot of stories and myths, especially when it comes to a place where you learn awesome technique or something, and you know, to bring up patriotic feelings. And remember, all this stuff wrapping, you know, it's all the stuff that kind of connects to Southern Shaolin is always wrapped around a certain patriotic propaganda and a certain type of message of fight against the oppressor. These arts came from the place that burned down. Remember the Shaolin Temple. Remember the Alamo. That was, you know, what it was. Whether there's any truth to it, that remains to be seen. I probably did the whole video here just explaining that. I still plan on doing a video for that, but I want to actually have some more stuff to document, some like articles and things like that to reference, so that it's a more proper video. But there you go. That's my take on the whole Southern Shaolin thing. I'm not going to outright say there wasn't a bunch of monks who maybe came down into the South and maybe trained a bit, but as far as a straight up temple and all that type of stuff, I think the jury's still out on that one. We just don't have any solid evidence for it at all. And considering the history of myth making in China, the odds are good that it probably wasn't true. I don't want to close the book on that yet. Like me personally, I don't want to just straight up say, yeah, it's garbage. But it's looking a lot like that could be what it is. So it's been about 2 hours. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties that we had, but overall, I'm glad I was able to host this. I'm glad you guys, the few of you guys who watched this, I'm glad you guys were here and were able to drop your questions. I do plan on doing this next month, and hopefully my job willing, because my job throws me a lot of overtime. Hopefully I'll be able to get this going next month as well, and we can get stuff going for that too. I am going to get myself something to eat, probably take a break, and then I got to work on this thing. So catch you guys later. Hope you guys enjoyed yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Take care.